All right, hello everybody. I'm Eric Vansel,
I'm Daryl Sanders.
and we're your hosts for this show. So yeah, man, you got some tea. You were saying earlier. Yep, I
Yeah,
got some
man. Got
coffee.
my tea.
This is actually. I mean, we'll get to the show in a second, guys. But just chill. This is a discussion show. I know a lot of people that are watching YouTube. They get all like, "Oh, they didn't get within the subject within like 5 seconds of their introduction." Not that kind of show. Um, this is called like Death. Oh man, now I can't even remember. It's some death coffee or something like that. It's supposed to be like the world's strongest coffee. So
Oh,
I'm really curious to try it for that reason. It's supposed to have like some insane caffeine content and everything else.
mm.
But I have to say, the coffee wouldn't necessarily be, I think, 100% necessary for me simply because this episode of Visions that we're reviewing tonight, Lop and Ocho, I actually
Mhm.
thought was somewhat pulse pounding. Like it was kind of an action-packed episode to me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one as well. I can get into the reasons later, but yeah, I thought this was a really cool one. Even the fact that one of them was like a bunny, it's cool. Like
Yeah, I
you get
know.
also,
I know. I mean, yeah, that was Lop. I mean, it
yeah. I
that was
mean,
kind of weird, but you have to remember though, she did come from another planet and
yeah. I mean, and it's Star Wars. I mean, like everybody's not going to be humanoids, so
right. I mean, she was humanoid-ish, I guess. But I
ish.
know what you
Yeah,
mean though.
yeah.
I know what you mean because at first I have to say that so I watched this episode a couple of times because obviously when we were originally going to do it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I mean,
Right.
unfortunately, our schedule has just been somewhat sporadic. So, which of course we apologize for. We're really trying to streamline that. I know you guys, the ones that tune in, like Ronaldo. Hey, Ronaldo, we see that you're here. And, I guess I can actually maybe kick some things off with Ronaldo's comment about this episode. He says, "Hello, guys. It was really fun. Not amazing, but really enjoyable." And that's kind of where I think I would fall too. There were some episodes that I thought were better, but
Hmm.
overall, man, I have to say this is a cool episode. I mean, right from the opening scene. One of the things that I really enjoyed about it was they actually had some narration. They put things in context, which is really one of the things that I always thought was one of the weaknesses of this entire
Hmm.
series is that I get it. It's a bunch of Japanese anime studios that wanted to produce some Star Wars content, and they don't necessarily relate to each other. It's not an episodic series in the sense of, you know, episode 2 builds on 1 and 3 builds on 2 and that kind of a thing. But it's really more of an anthology based series where things may not even have anything to do with each other. So to me, it's more important that they actually put things in context, which this episode did. Right away, you get a voiceover narration. You see the Empire. That's another thing too. They didn't really do anything weird with the Empire or anything like that, or some of the Star Wars characters, like they didn't animate it too much. It was more traditional Star Wars done in the style of anime, and for that, I think that I would almost, if I had to pick an episode where I wouldn't mind them basing an entire season on, even though this wasn't maybe my favorite episode, this would probably be a template that I would use.
Hmm. Well, I would say this. I really did enjoy, and I'm glad you brought it up, the narration part because I thought that was something that's been missing from a lot of these different
Absolutely.
episodes. So that was one of my pleasant surprises. Like, oh, okay, awesome. Um, this particular episode for me was cool because the animation, it actually kind of the animation started off almost kind of very
Yeah.
Clone Wars ish.
Yes. Clone Wars ish. I can't even say it
See,
either.
I couldn't even say
It's a tongue twister, man. I admit it. It is.
it. Yeah. So at first I was kind of like, oh, okay. And then when you finally get to the planet, it looks a little bit different. I was like, okay. It's like they changed the animation slightly, and then we started to move forward into the story, and I thought the story was really cool. I thought it was really great. It was something different. It definitely had a lot of the Oriental vibe, of course, to it. You felt that presence heavy, and um, it kind of had that whole um, that struggle, but within the family, which I thought that was a cool dynamic. Almost like if Luke and Leia didn't agree with each other. That's kind of what it reminded me of.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that one of the things that was interesting, and I think I had to get past this on my first viewing, because like I said, I think it was the second viewing that I really dialed in and I really ended up loving this episode. But I remember, I don't know if it was the mood that I was in or what, but there's a lot of yelling in this episode. Like they yell at each other through the whole episode.
Hmm.
I mean, except for maybe a couple of times where they're calmer, it's just a bunch of people yelling at each other. It's kind of like the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or whatever, but it's kind of that reality show sort of vibe, but done in this style, which I thought was kind of interesting. And at first it was kind of off-putting, but when you realize the stakes, where you have this planet Tau, which of course we'll get into some of the specifics in a second, but I thought that they did a really fantastic job of really giving you pretty much the boundaries of the story and what this episode was going to be about. And also, really, I think more than any of the other episodes that dealt with a family type of a thing, you really felt the family dynamic, the dysfunction, the struggle,
Hmm.
the love that's being lost because people find themselves on opposite sides of a particular um side or ideal.
Ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it definitely had that whole Obi-Wan Anakin thing at the end of Revenge of the Sith,
yeah.
where you're like, well, I believe that the Jedi are evil, then you are lost, and it's that whole thing. Um, One of the things I really love the turn though, because it was kind of like, okay, uh Ocho kind of started off really like all loving and just accepting and just like wanted to bring this girl into her life. And oh no, and the father was one, he was kind of like, yeah, I don't know who this little girl is, but she was just like, no, I can tell. And she was really aggressive about everything, and she's like, oh yeah, we got plenty of food, and
Well,
taking
the
her to the
thing is,
water. And
what's funny about that is like she was really, and this is one of the things I was going to point out too, is the fact that she starts out being like really bubbly and happy and
yeah, that's what I'm
just kind of
saying. And
almost silly, and then she kind of takes a really dark turn toward the end, and they did a really good job of portraying that actually, because
yeah,
she's a
definitely.
different character at the end. I mean,
Hmm.
especially when she's just kind of like, what is family, and just chops, the droid. I mean, it's just, there's some really dark, poignant moments of this thing. Well, let me get to some of these Ronaldo comments before we start getting into the actual episode in detail. Ronaldo says, the one thing I hated about this was that stupid bunny girl design. Didn't take me out of the episode. It just wasn't for me.
It did give me Lola Bunny from Space Jam vibes. So.
Well, he said it reminded me of that green rabbit back in the day. He also says, the animation was amazing. The fight scenes were really cool. And then, of course, I noticed everyone yelling at each other, but that's something that happens a lot in anime, so it didn't surprise me. And yeah,
Hmm.
I know. I mean, it's one of those things where while I am not really deep into anime, I I'm a fan of it. And I remember that is one of the things that they always do. They always yell at each other, but for some reason, it felt more out of place in this than it normally does. And I think a lot of it is just because of the situation and the fact that it's Star Wars. So you're not really used to everybody just, because it was one of those things where they were yelling at each other where it really,
It wasn't necessary.
yeah. Yeah, it just felt
Yeah.
out of place. That's really all it was. In a lot of anime it doesn't, but I think based on this context it does. So, with that, now we're sort of going into the episode. So, they give you this whole narration. which is something that we have seen in some of the proper, what I would say the animation or the animated series proper, right? Your Bad Batch, your Clone Wars, your Rebels, things like that, where you have the Empire basically establishing a presence on a planet, and they're promising them, yeah, we're going to take care of you guys, and we're going to give you peace, and we're going to give you security and safety and, medical
Blah blah
care
blah
and
blah.
food and all this stuff. But really what they're doing is exploiting the planet. In this case, it's the planet Tau.
Hmm.
And basically you had this family clan who's pretty high up in it, and that's where we have the father. And then we have Ocho, who's the daughter, and then Lop, who is this like runaway Empire slave or something that pretty much finds her way. It kind of gave me an Aladdin vibe at first when I first saw that. She's kind of running through the marketplace, she's going to steal something. And of course
Oh
it
yeah.
deviates from that, but it was sort of setting that up at first. I thought
Hmm.
anyway. But
Yeah,
one
I
of
mean, you get to see that big collar on her neck too.
yeah,
You
right.
know,
And I mean, and that's what it is. That the narration, I just found that it was a lot easier to understand what was going on in this episode. Besides,
definitely.
the narrator basically telling you what's happening, you could follow the action. And they weren't trying to deviate too much from what Star Wars actually is. They're drawing the stormtroopers and, various Empire guys, even though the one dude that Ocho was making the deal with, he kind of remind me of Jared Leto's Joker in a way. Like kind of a mixture between him and Thrawn or something, but
Yeah, like a little punk rock
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I thought
imperial
that was
officer.
yes. And I thought that was interesting. But just the way that they carried the whole episode, it was very linear, and it was very much where, like you said, the father begrudgingly, the Ocho wants to take Lop in because it's like she made a new friend and a new sister, and it's like, oh yeah, we got plenty of food, we got all this stuff, and he's kind of like, no, and and then of course when when she says all this stuff, and he's like, well, great, now it's like it would basically violate my honor or something if I didn't do this.
Yep,
And I remember at
exactly.
first thinking like, man, I mean, can you imagine being Lop at this point? I'd be like, I don't know if I really want to live in this house. This guy, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Well, yeah, I mean, on one hand, you wouldn't want to, but I mean, because he really doesn't want you, but at the same time, like he has all the things that you need, though. So, in a way, and he became cool about it.
yeah,
It's just that this wasn't his plan. That's all. It's just kind of almost figuring like finding out your parents really didn't want you. Like, well, we weren't trying to have any kids, but you just popped up. But we love you, but we just weren't trying to have you. It's like,
exactly.
oh, okay.
Exactly. Yeah, that's basically what it came down to for me. And I think more than anything, it was kind of a surprising dynamic because he starts out being so against her in the beginning, right? And then
Mhm.
he ends up, of course, passing on the whole family lineage or whatever, the whole tradition and
Mhm.
everything, the lightsaber and stuff to her. And I thought that it was a really cool thing that he actually goes from begrudgingly doing this and he doesn't want it. There was a nice little character arc there because what they do is they establish this fact that um Lop basically becomes part of the family, and then they fast forward 7 years, and now you're seeing that the Empire's presence is actually weighing even more on this planet. And now there's that definite split and division between Ocho, the actual blood daughter, and her father,
Mhm.
where the
Mhm.
father is actually doing some more terrorist type of acts and everything else. And, she's trying to avoid that. She's trying to actually negotiate and saying, no, we need the Empire. We need what they have to offer. And it's very much a classic storytelling type of a device where they always do things like this. The The original miniseries back in '84 had this kind of a theme, which of course is based on a lot of the Nazi stuff, right? Where you had Nazis coming in and, they basically were like, yeah, the youth, we started this whole youth group and stuff like that. So these kids would join up and they felt like they had a place to belong. Well, the parents knew better. The parents were like, hey, man, I don't know if I like where this is going. And the kids are like, no, you don't understand. This has given us a lot of opportunity and stuff like that. And it caused a lot of division. And you get the same thing in this, where the father understands. He knows. He's seen this kind of thing before. Where Ocho still has this whole ideal, no, the Empire's our friend, and the Empire's going to do all this stuff for us,
Yeah. Yeah, it's the whole idealistic mentality. And, what I really think it was cool was that, like, with Lop, I think, the reason why she created that bond between her and her father, who she now calls her father, is because, it's a little bit different when you didn't have to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, sort of being adopted, so like you didn't have to take me in, and you almost feel like you owe them a sense of loyalty, and you want to do above and beyond because they didn't have to do anything for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of where that bond and relationship with Lop and the father became. But I think with Ocho, the division is because of the fact that it's okay, we're blood. It's like it's the typical rebellion of a child. It's kind of like, you kind of want to, your parents want you to do one thing. You're like, no, it should be done this way. This is that old ancient thinking type,
Yeah.
vibe. And,
Yeah.
and so, and that's an interesting dichotomy in that, because you have two people who want to be like sisters. And then, then there's another where it's like, okay, well, I'm this person's surrogate father. And there's a balance that I'm seeing that you have to kind of have, but at the end of it all, they're their own people. And as they've gotten older, now they've kind of formed their own opinions. The daughters have formed their own opinions on society. And as a father, you kind of have to kind of like try to mold that, but at the same time, you have to let them do their own thing. And so to see that Ocho kind of sided with the other guy, from the Empire, and Lop is just kind of in the middle. She's trying to understand, like, okay,
Yeah.
she kind of sees both sides to the coin, and she's just like, she just wants cooler heads to prevail. Like, okay, let's just stop and think about and talk this out. And Ocho is just kind of like, no, we need to do this
Well,
now.
and that's it. That's it. So you have Ocho basically representing one side and the father representing the other. And then of course Lop is in the middle, like you said, and trying desperately, all she wants is for the family dynamic to come back
to be
together.
together.
It's like, I
Right.
just want us to be a family. I really want us to be a family. Why can't we just, let's
Be a
just all
family
go
again.
home and, be a family. And you could really
Understand that.
Yeah, you can understand that, but I think not only can you understand and even relate to it, but I think that this episode did a really good job of really internalizing that struggle. I think of all the people as an audience, I think you were meant to actually be put in Lop's position. Like you were supposed to
Definitely.
feel the way that,
Or wait, yeah.
yeah, she feels, right? Because the more that it's split off, because towards, I would say, the beginning, after they say, okay, 7 years later, and you see that the father caused this explosion or whatever in this factory or whatever it was, some installation. And of course, Ocho's just like, oh, I can't believe he did this. And, now she's going to try to smooth things over. It's like as time goes on, you see that division getting wider and wider. And you see them digging their heels in the ground a little bit more. Now, I will say that the father seemed to be a little bit more, I guess, patient and maybe willing to understand things, because he was willing to try to forget everything. And, I think he even said at one point when he ends up finally dueling Ocho that, you're my little girl, I just want you to come home or whatever. It's just that the difference between the father and Lop's point of view, even though they pretty much shared the same point of view, I think that the difference really was the father knew that it probably wasn't going to happen. Whereas Lop was basically trying to make it happen. It's like, no, I'm not going to let it. You're my sister. I'm basically going to make you come back, and we're going to be a family, whether everybody likes it or not. And the father's like, you know what? Okay, this is what I want, but I don't think this is going to end well for us.
Yeah. And the fact that he decided to share this whole lineage of the family lightsaber and kind of like, just telling her the whole story of how the family kind of came into possession of this lightsaber, what it means,
Mm-hmm.
and
And even knowing the Force.
yeah, and then even saying that, it's not about blood. It's about kinship. It's about,
Yeah.
and I thought that was really cool and powerful.
Well,
And then
it's
when we actually get the chance to see that, like when they actually start to duel, because he was just kind of like, and that whole touching moment, I loved it. It was like, well, she told me she loves you, and he kind of looks at me, he's like, well, that's good to know. It was just kind of like,
yeah.
it was kind of like, but I still gotta go do what I gotta do. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. I mean, because
And that was
you knew
just
what was going to happen. You knew what was
exactly,
happening, and that was the thing, is that you felt, in a way, I think that they did a really good job of putting you in the place of each one of the characters, honestly, because in that moment
sure.
you felt the father's pain, the fact
Hmm.
that it's kind of like, well, it's good to know all this, but I know how this is going to end. It's not going to end well, and
Hmm.
it's just that almost that grieving that he's going
Yeah,
through, you
like a
know.
silent grieving. Yeah,
Sure, because he knows what's going to happen. He knows that this is just that it's all lost. And
yeah, it's either her or me. Yeah, at this point.
yeah. And I mean, at
And then,
first, of course, he goes to duel her and stuff like that. And I mean, I think about the only thing that maybe partially took me out a little bit, and it's only because of the brevity of the episode, right? It's only because they can't make these things an hour long. Well, I mean, they could, but they didn't, right? They average
hmm
between like 13 and 20, 25 minutes, something like that. It did seem that Ocho got like really intensely dark really quick.
yeah,
That
I
almost
think
seemed
that's
a little
just
unrealistic. I mean, I think that they were trying to imply that maybe the dark side of the Force was kind of, you know, getting inside of her a
brewing
little
in her.
bit. Yeah.
Well, also, I think it's also the manipulation of um the empire,
Yeah. But it just
because you
seemed,
can also see, like when she showed up, she's all in imperial gear. She had the badge, and I mean, like they made her an officer and everything.
well, and right. And again, that the whole Nazi comparison I made, or V, because that was exactly the thing, the visitor thing. And it's kind of like it does give you that sense of community, belonging, power. And that can be very enticing. And
And I
especially
think
if
that's
you're
the
already at odds, you know?
well, I think that's the part that really, and I think a lot of people might have skipped over, was that, like, she was next in line to be, because she kept saying like, okay, well, as the leader of the net, like I'm going to make sure I'm going to make, and when she realized she still didn't have enough power on her side, she joined up with the empire who had power to give her to
Yeah.
do what she needed to do.
And it wasn't, again, it wasn't so much that her getting, somewhat dark or whatever didn't make sense. But I mean, she got to a Palpatine level of darkness, not of power, but of darkness that
Mm.
I just thought was a little too quick. It wasn't unrealistic. It just happened too fast.
Well, I think there's especially, I think it really kind of transpired once she realized that Lop had the lightsaber, because
Well,
once again that
that's true. Well,
completely.
that did. And that, once again, one of the things that they're really, really good at with this whole Star Wars Vision series is those reveals. Like every time they go to do some major reveal, and it's I think this is the third time now where the big reveal has been some sort of igniting of a lightsaber, and the other
Mhm.
character's like, whoa. And so it was kind of cool because, Ocho goes to attack, and of course you hear that famous snap hum of a lightsaber igniting. And of course, which I also thought was cool, was that there was like the little writings and stuff on the blade, and there was energy around
Mhm.
that, and that was a cool
Yeah,
spin on the lightsaber.
like
But
the
it was at
katana,
the
yep.
yeah, right. But it was at that moment though, and then of course Ocho realizing, because this is this big thing, right? I mean, this passing down of the lightsaber, this is like a birthright thing. This is something that she had waited all her life, and it's like, well, wait a minute. Now, this is the only thing that I was thinking about, and it hit me again when I watched it again tonight, was her reaction to me, even though granted she probably wasn't 100% in her right mind. It was kind of stupid. It's like, well, what'd you think was going to happen? I mean, here, she goes through this whole thing to where she cuts off the ceremonial ponytail thing or whatever. It's kind of like a sign that she's, basically leaving the family and leaving all that behind. It's kind
Mhm.
of like at that moment to me, if I was the dad, I would have just been like, look, this is, you left us, What did you think I was going to do?
Yeah, I mean, but I think she still felt like, that this person who's supposed to be her sister came in between her family too, and that also created that, those seeds of jealousy, and kind of just fueled whatever she was already going through, that whatever darkness she already had kind of
Well, I
permeated
mean,
through
don't
her.
get me wrong. Yes, I get it. I mean, when you're kind of going that dark and you're going on this path, it's not like you're really thinking 100% clearly, right? At this point, she was way more emotional than rational. By the way,
Right.
there's another little thing that I got to make a point while we're talking about this particular scene, is that this is something that drives me nuts in a lot of movies, where they'll show a woman, like she'll have like all this hair or whatever, and she starts like, cutting it or doing whatever, like, because she's gone crazy or whatever. Or in this case, she cuts out the ponytail,
And
and
her
then
hair is perfectly.
yeah, it's like this perfect short hairstyle all of a sudden. It's like, that drives me insane. And of course, when I saw this, that came back on me. I'm like, oh, come on. But again, it wasn't enough to take me out of the story. I just was kind of like, oh, here we go. You cut this ponytail thing and it falls into this perfectly coiffed, hairstyle or whatever, which is crazy.
I know.
But I thought that it was really cool the way that they did bring you into all these different characters' mindsets. And I thought that the world building was actually cool too, because in this 20-minute episode, you really got the sense of what Tao was about, the planet, the community, this particular family and their dynasty or whatever, the Empire's oppression, a little bit about how the Empire was, this lost family dynamic. I mean, I thought that they did a really good job of actually building up some of this stuff to where you really felt it wasn't like a lot of the other episodes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they definitely gave you a lot of context to things, and that was much needed and appreciated. I also think that, with the dialogue, it was very poignant. It was like no wasted dialogue. Like, it wasn't
Yes,
just a bunch of crap. It was just kind of like everything kind of had significance to it. So,
absolutely.
do you have a favorite character in this episode?
Ah, you know what? I mean, yeah, that little droid. um, no. That's what I love about it. Is I actually loved all the characters equally in this episode. I mean, I thought
Okay.
that they were all really well done, and I don't. I mean, I guess if I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be the father.
That
I
was
mean,
mine too.
you know,
Yeah.
I just because, and I'll tell you how I'm basing this. If somebody were to say, okay, we're going to make a spin-off series based on this episode, it would be the father that I would want to see lead it. He's the one that I would really want to know more about, or maybe know a backstory or something like that. I mean, I also thought that there was just a lot of depth and richness to his character. There was a lot of dynamics to it.
Yeah, that was the thing for me. Like, I think the dynamics of his character, because we got a chance to see him go through several different phases of it
Hmm.
of emotion. So, we saw kind of like the first when he first met Lop, he was like, "Ugh, I don't want to do this." Then we kind of saw him being kind of more of a loving kind of father. Then you see him kind of being adversarial with his daughter. And then you kind of see the regret that he has, and him just wanting to be a family. You kind of see all these different dynamics in his personality that he's able to effectively communicate to us. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but I
the father would definitely be my father favorite one.
I have to say though, one of the things that I thought was like, really, dude, this is it. Is like after all this stuff, he goes to Lop. He's just like, oh yeah, um, if I ever kind of made you feel like I was really more into Ocho, and you guys weren't equal. Yeah, sorry about that. I mean, that's basically what he said. Yeah, I apologize. My bad. It's like it wasn't even. I'm like, really? All this time, and that's really all you got to say. I mean, granted, it wasn't like he had a whole lot of time, but it was just kind of like so
Let me just clear
just
the air real quick, man.
casual. Just like, yeah, man, sorry about that. About that whole, not treating you equal and making you feel like less than family thing. Yeah. But then again, I guess he made up for it though, because he basically gave her the whole family lineage. It's
Yep.
like that was really what was truly meaningful.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's
Yeah, I
get to
really think.
let me get to
Go ahead.
some of these comments real quick. Um Ronaldo's got um so yeah, let's go with some of these here. Says the way that they managed the family themes was really good. Yeah, that was the thing, and he goes on to say, "I hope they use the theme of an adoptive family more often." That's a good point. That's something that even though we were talking around, we didn't really address this. And that is that this is a little bit different from a lot of the themes, because you did have this somewhat adoptive family dynamic theme to it, where you're
Hmm.
bringing in somebody from the outside and you're raising that person as your child. And one of the things that I thought was really, really heartbreaking, like the ending of this thing was just
Hmm.
so it what it reminded me of in a weird sort of way was the ending of Cloverfield. You remember that movie?
I remember the movie. I just don't remember the ending.
Well, if you remember throughout the whole thing, because before the monster comes, spoiler alert, by the way. Before the monster comes and starts wrecking havoc on New York or wherever, they were showing that this couple was, at one point, they were happy and they were kind of estranged, and they were kind of breaking up, actually. And they kept flashing back to this home video that they had taken of them at this whole, fair or carnival type of a thing. And at the end of the movie, after they're wiped out and stuff like that, it kind of flashes to that. And it's really crazy, because after all this, they're going back to this good time or whatever. And that's kind of what this reminded me of, was that this family had fallen so hard that it was essentially destroyed. Their family dynamic was destroyed. And yet it ends with, in that whole chilling, I just want to be, like the perfect family or whatever it was. And they had faded to black as that was being said. I mean, that was just an ultra powerful moment to me. Like, it really
Yeah.
punctuated the whole vibe of this episode
Emotion.
perfectly. Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I said, they hit a lot of great beats, yeah, at the right moment, and I think that's also part of the pacing thing, which was really good on this particular episode as well.
Oh
Like, you
yeah.
didn't feel rushed. It felt like
Yeah, that's
you
a
were
good
in the
point
right
too,
space at the right
actually.
time.
And it was something that I felt, but I didn't really think about it consciously. Was that the pacing was really good. It didn't
Mhm.
feel rushed. It didn't feel like they were dragging anything out. And it's kind of like you had said with the dialogue, but I would even go as far as to say the scenes themselves. Everything, there was nothing wasted. And
Right.
everything felt
No
like
wasted
it
movement.
belonged there. It's like, okay, there's no filler in this. Ronaldo says, yeah, Ocho became bad a bit fast. She didn't seem someone who would become like that so quick. And that was pretty much, what we were saying is that she, it was obvious like why she went dark, right? I mean, she went dark
Mhm.
because she believed that the Empire was really the key to the survival and pretty much the future thriving of that planet. And again, it's just kind of an ideological difference where the father
Yeah, they
saw them
both
more
loved.
as a cancer and something that was corrupting and destroying the planet. And
Mhm.
so you have these two ideals that are going back and forth. And it wasn't even that she went dark. It's like I said, it was just how fast and how intense it got in that short period of time just seemed a little crazy. Um, he says, actually, Lop's story is the kind of story I would like to see for Anakin, a slave thief who is also force sensitive. Well, you kind of get that with Ezra.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, Ezra definitely had, and this had a lot of that Rebels Ezra vibe to it as well. I was actually really surprised when Lop used the Force to grab that sigh. I was like, "Whoa, all right."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's kind of one of those things where they, I think that they could expand more. It's going to be really interesting to me if we're going to get a season 2 of Visions, because I
Mm.
wonder what kind of themes they would explore if they get a season 2. Because it seems to me like if, we're only one more episode until we're done with this thing. And I remember from episode 1 when neither one of us were really all that crazy about it. Now I can honestly say that if they did a season 2, I would check it out because I like enough of the episodes and I think it's interesting that I would be curious on what themes they would explore because it seems like every episode was taking a different part of the anime style of storytelling and it's giving you a piece of this within the realm, of course, of Star Wars. That's what I think is really cool about it, is that they're actually trying to attack different themes that they can explore within the style of anime. So in season 2, it seems to me like if they go on, they would then have to widen that, cast a little bit of a wider net and maybe explore some of these themes a little bit deeper. The adoptive family dynamic being one of them. What they could do with that. And then, of course, Ronaldo pretty much says, yeah, I think the adoptive family theme was used in a way in episode 9. Now, episode 9, it'll be really interesting when we get to that because so that'll be next Monday, which is good because I was thinking about it that I believe doesn't the Book of Boba Fett
Yes,
come
first
out the
Boba Fett,
29th
the
or is it?
29th, yeah,
Yeah.
29th.
Okay. So it's perfect because next Monday we'll end up reviewing the last episode of Visions. And the following Monday, we'll start reviewing the
Episode 1.
first episode of the Book of Boba Fett. So even though we had to take a couple of weeks off or whatever, it was just enough because I remember we were saying, like, oh, yeah, there might be a little bit of time. Like, there might be a couple of weeks or something between when we finish Visions and start the Book of Boba Fett. What are we going to do? Well, turns out that
We already know.
we already know. So Ronaldo says, if there is a season 2, would you prefer them to continue this story or make a new one? And what he's talking
I,
about is like the stories that we've already established in the first season, or just create whole
right.
new stories.
I think some of them deserve to be continued, others not so much.
Yeah, that's kind of where I sit too. Now, the interesting discussion would be which ones.
Of course.
Because there's some of them. I mean, arguably, you could continue the story of all of them, but I pretty much fall in the same thing as you do. You know, it's like there's some where I don't know. I'm really actually curious on this last episode coming up. If
Yeah,
it
I read what it was about, but I don't,
right,
see it and
right,
play it
but
out.
I'm wondering if it actually references any of the earlier episodes of the season, because it sounds like it could. But I mean, offhand, I wouldn't mind seeing a continuation of this one. You know, they could
Yeah, this one
do
would be
something
cool.
else. You know, of course the episode 5, 7, maybe which one was the one with the brother and sister?
I think that was
Is that 3 or
4.
4?
I want to say it was 4.
Yeah, it could be. I wouldn't mind that either. Okay, so Ronaldo has a couple. He says, I mean, episode 9, Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, with the whole Rey thing. I mean, they did sort of explore the theme, but
even with Lando, it seems kind of like that's where I was headed too.
Oh yeah, with Janna.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I remember they were always trying to make them related, and I think some people were trying to imply that maybe there was, Lando was just kind of like a wink, wink, nod, nod. Yeah, let's help you find him. And it's kind of like he knows or something.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, after watching it again, like I said, I think I watched it Thursday because I remember when we did Friday's show, I was like, oh yeah, I watched it last night or whatever, and we talked about it a little bit. But upon rewatching it very recently, I'm taking Lando's comment at face value. I think he just wants to help her find where she comes from. But they could certainly, I mean, they could actually make a whole spin-off series on that. Which, I mean, hey, right? They keep promising us we're going to get that Lando series. Maybe that's...
maybe that was it.
Maybe that's what it was, right?
Yep.
Now, Ronaldo's talking about Visions episode 9 now. I'll say this. The animation is special.
Uh-oh.
Huh. Yeah,
Let's see what he means by that.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
I have a bad feeling about this.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, and here's the thing, like, controversially speaking, I think that I wouldn't mind seeing a continuation of the first episode, but have it make sense. Because I like the world. I actually like I like the animation. I like the vibe. I liked the characters, but the problem was, more so than I think any other episode in this season, we had a complete lack of context for that first episode. And now after seeing, because I remember on the first couple episodes, we're like, well, by the end of this season, after we've watched enough of these things, we'll get more of a vibe, right? Because I remember we were being pretty critical, but it's like, well, we don't really know even what context to put these episodes in yet. But now, I could safely say that if the first episode had been maybe the 4th, I might not have minded so much. But that was our introduction into this world. And it was weird. But I did like some of the aspects of it, And so Ronaldo was like, I mean, they used it with Rey being adopted by the Skywalker family. Yeah, well, at the end, I mean, I guess you could say that Leia was kind of doing it, but it really wasn't until the end that you really, you really got the whole Rey is being adopted into the Skywalkers, at least complete. Then Ronaldo goes on to say, we have some kind of continuation for episode 1 in the novel, which is really good. Wait a second. There's a Visions novel?
Oh, Lord.
Well, I didn't know. Did you know?
No.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Really? My whole thing, well, I mean, I guess, you know what? I'll have to do some more research on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're about to watch everybody walk through this on live.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I'm processing this. Well, because here's the thing. I'm still trying to read The Light of the Jedi. I mean, this is kind of like how Queen's, was it Peril?
Shadow.
Queen's
Peril.
Have you actually finished it yet?
No. I haven't.
Well,
I've had so much other stuff going on.
I know, man. I'm like maybe halfway now through The Light of the Jedi, and it's not because it's a bad book. It's actually a very good book, but I'm just having the hardest time, and I keep getting diverted by all these fantastic comics they have. I just read Crimson Reign the other day. Man, I mean, you want to talk about it heating up, and then of course the Star Wars. The basic Star Wars comic that, the main one.
Mm-hmm.
That was really cool. What was the other one I just read? I think I read a couple Dr. Aphra ones. Oh, and the latest Darth Vader and the latest High Republic. So I read all those within the last 3 or 4 days. And all of them are just phenomenal. And they just announced Claudia Gray's new High Republic book that's coming out. So I'm really looking forward to that. I mean, there's just so much that's going on and so much world building that's happening within Star Wars right now, within the books and the comics, that is really exciting. And of course, they're continuing this in some of the series. Like the Book of Boba Fett, a little of The Mandalorian. And of course, what we've been promised for Ahsoka and all that. They're finally doing what we've always wanted them to do, which is take this whole thing in totality and tell some of the story in the comics, some in books, some in the shows. But what they're doing really correctly, in my opinion, which is one of the things that I thought they might mess up, is that when you start to tell parts of stories in different mediums, you could actually lose casual fans because you start to think in terms of, well, wait a minute, you mean I got to read this and watch that and do all this just to get the big picture or just to understand what's happening? The good news is you don't. Because if you only watched, say, The Mandalorian or only, read maybe a particular comic series, you can enjoy it for what it is. It doesn't ruin that. But if you do get into all these other things, you are immensely rewarded as a fan. Oh, okay. So Ronaldo basically enlightens us. He says, it's called Star Wars Ronin. And I do remember that. I remember when we were first getting ready to review Visions that I had heard that they were coming out with it, but I didn't know it was out. I didn't know anything about it. So, I mean, I don't know, down the line I might read that. But I mean, I still have, man. So I have The Light of the Jedi I got to finish. I have Into the Darkness or whatever, which is the second book, which is a Claudia Gray book. Then I actually went and bought all 3 of the, the Queen's Shadow, Queen's Peril, the third book too. So I got all 3 of those now. What else do I have? I've got and at least one other one. Man. Oh yeah, and then there's a couple of music books, right? And that's the thing. It's like I almost have no hope of reading all these. At least not in a very timely fashion. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we tried to do the book review thing on this show, and we got one of them.
Yeah.
We got Master and
Yep.
Apprentice. That was it.
Apprentice. Yeah.
That was the only
That was the
one
only
that we
one.
were able to read simultaneously and do it in a timely enough manner that we could actually review it. But with our schedules the way they are, it's kind of like, it just wouldn't happen. I mean, can you imagine if we were like, yeah, let's go ahead and review Light of the Jedi? We'd still be waiting for the review. The book came out like, I don't know, a year ago. I mean, it's coming up. I think it came out in like January or February of this year. So slow going, but I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing the next episode of Visions. I think that it's going to be interesting to see, much like the episode that they started the series with. I'm curious on what episode they're going to end it with. Like what kind of a tone is it going to be going out? But
Yeah.
let's give some overall thoughts of like kind of final thoughts again of this episode. So I'll be cool. I'll be the nice host. I'll let you go first.
Oh, thank you. Some overall thoughts would be, I'd probably say I would give this like a 7.5, 8. I think the animation was really cool. I love the narration, love the story. The plot was great. Action was awesome. I actually wouldn't mind seeing like a continuation of this. So, yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go for the same thing. I'm gonna give it a solid 8.
Okay.
I think that, yeah, you got context right away. It gave us a lot of the world in which they were living, but then it also focused on the family dynamic, which I thought was awesome. And I think that it was really cool how the Force and the Jedi influenced this without actually overpowering the story, to where they're present, they're there in the
Right.
world, but they weren't basically the focal
In the
point of the
forefront.
story. Yeah, and I would
Yeah.
like to see more of that. So, yeah, man, I give this thing just a solid one. Now, Ronaldo's got a couple more comments. He says, I feel you, man. Besides Ronan, got to get caught with the High Republic, the comics, and I'm reading the Witcher books. Yeah, which is really weird, because like season 2 of The Witcher's coming out. If it's not out, it's coming out any day now. And it's weird that they got books, because, and maybe, if you're a fan of it, you could tell me. I thought the game is what everything was based on. I remember the Witcher game. Now, what I'm not sure of is the game based on the books, or was the game the first thing that came out, and now you had the series and you have books and things are coming out as a result of that? So, there is that. Let's see. I'll give it an 8 out of 10, Ronaldo says. It's really cool. I noticed, by the way, that we're all on the same grading system now.
Hopefully, yeah.
Nobody's given like, because we'll say like, I'll give it an 8, and somebody else is like, yeah, I'll give it an A-. It's like, okay, guys, we got to settle on a scale here. Like, what are we gonna give number ratings or what? And then he goes, if it wasn't for the stupid rapid design, I'll give it a 9.
That was really bothering them.
Yeah, I guess so. How do you feel about the serial tricks? Or Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which came out on 4K not too long ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that overall they're on the right track. If they do, now they haven't announced a new season yet, but, we'll see. Oh, and then Ronaldo basically says, he answers the Witcher question for us. The books came first, and the game is based on them. The series is based on the books. Okay, that makes sense. That makes a little bit more sense. It's interesting, too, because, speaking of books, Amazon now has a new Jack Reacher series out. It's just called Reacher, and the people that are fans of the books love it, because the guy that they actually have playing Jack Reacher is a lot closer, both in the way he acts and the physical description of the books. And so the whole thing is on there now. So, I guess catch that if you can. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool Star Wars stuff coming out. What do you think we're going to talk about Friday?
I was actually going to ask you, are we going to do it Friday? Because, it's Christmas Eve.
Yeah, I know
so-
it's Christmas Eve, but I think we can probably sneak a show in there or something. Who
Okay.
knows? Maybe we'll, I can certainly do it. I mean, why not?
Well,
I doubt anybody's
yeah.
going to watch it. But at least it's there. I mean, I feel normally I would say, let's go ahead and take it off or whatever. But I mean, we bailed on so many lately that
Yeah.
I kind of like feel compelled to maybe,
Yeah.
maybe
Put
do
some more
one.
out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we got some definite topics we can talk about. So we just have to pick which one we want to do, and there we go.
No previews. You gonna keep it cryptic like that? Like, yeah, we got some stuff we can talk about.
Well, there's a whole Ahsoka stuff. There's what was the other one? We already covered the Han Solo. Oh,
Yeah,
there's the series updates, like some of the other
Yeah, that's true because there's some Obi-Wan news. There's
Obi-Wan
there's
news. Yeah.
there's some other stuff, and then of course it looks like I just heard the other day they're gonna release a new Han and Chewie series, like comic book series that takes place. I think it was like after episode 4 or something, or maybe it was even after episode 6. I don't know. It was something. It was somewhere around there in that timeline, though.
The whole Patty Jenkins thing being back on. So, there's stuff.
There's stuff that we can talk about. There's always stuff to talk about with Star Wars. I mean, we can, or you know what else we could? Well, no, we already did that. I did that with Dave, actually. The reviewing the holiday special Lego thing. The one that we didn't review, that we said we were going to review, was the Halloween one. That would be so bizarre.
Weird.
It's Christmas
especially
Eve.
right now.
We're going to review the Halloween episode, or whatever. That wouldn't be cool. But yeah, we'll think of something. We'll think of something special, because why not? Like I said, I wasn't going to do it, but I thought, hey, why not? So until Friday, we're coming up on the Christmas season. So hopefully you guys have some time to spend with your friends, your family, and us. So I guess until Friday, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.